Hi there, welcome to the channel and hello again. If you're a return viewer, you catch me here on the 8th of February. Yes, I just had to check my watch for that. It is the morning of a Sunday, 8th of February, and I'm just going to do a really quick review of a book that I finished about 10 days ago, and that book is I Deliver Parcels in Beijing by Anyan. Hope I am pronouncing that right. I am not a Chinese speaker. Anyway, now this book made waves in China when it was published in 2023, became a bestseller, and is now being translated to several other languages, including English, and the English translation by Mr. Jack Hargraves came out last year, 2025, to some acclaim. There's a lot of good glowing reviews of this book online, so I thought I'd better have a look at what's it all about. Now, it is basically a memoir by a gentleman who is now in his 40s, Mr. Anyan, and it looks at basically the jobs that he'd had over the last 10, 15, 20 years since he left school. Now, the main bulk of this book takes part in like the 2010s. It's divided into several sections. The main section, which is pretty much conforms to what's on the tin, on the title of the book, is about his job delivering parcels in Beijing, to no surprise. And it's a fascinating read, the first section. Apparently it is a modified version of something that he wrote in around 2020 in China during the COVID lockdown, and it became a bit of a sensation online, and that led him into the world of publishing. And there's more on that later in the book. So we follow his progress delivering parcels, and online shopping seemed to be massive in China in the 2000s, early 2010s, more so than in the West. And basically everybody there is getting parcels delivered, so it's a bit of a madhouse. And there are several companies vying for the business to get the parcels to the customers, and the delivery process seems to be a lot more involved over there, involving people always having to take delivery of the parcels, or else the courier is seen as a failure. Now, there's all sorts of madness, having to supply your own gear, all sorts of crazy hours, meal time weirdness, and all sorts of things. So, the first section of the book is pretty much his couple of jobs he had in Beijing delivering parcels, and then we switch to a section in Shanghai where he moved to, and he has a job in a convenience shop which doesn't go too well. And then he has a longer section about his experiences selling bicycles in a Shanghai shop, and all his weirdness going on with his co-workers, and a couple of which were basically stealing from the company. His manager, who basically knew nothing about bicycles but was like a keen businesswoman, basically wanted him to stay on and essentially run the business, but he had no interest in it. Then the book kind of loops around back to his earlier experiences in life. Now, this seems to be a section of the book that was kind of like added on to the original text, and we basically go through pretty much all of his jobs. I think he had something like 20 jobs in total by the end of this book, and does all sorts of things. Out of school, he becomes like an apprentice comic artist. He gets involved in writing and producing bootleg books and CD-ROMs about various famous cartoons, manga, animation, all that type of thing. And it just shows how cutthroat the business there. We in the West, we still have this kind of weird image of China, and this book kind of blows it away. I think we intellectually know China is not the old conformist, communist, hive mind state that many of us were brought up to believe, but it just takes a book like this to show it the reality of the situation, that China is really more hyper-capitalist than many of places that you'd find in the West these days, and it has been that way for more than a decade, maybe 20 years now, and a lot of the excesses that tech companies and whatever in the West are trying to bring in now, they have been a reality in China for a couple of decades now, and the government there, I assume, tries to keep a lid on it, but just in memoirs like this, you find that it's really wildly out of control in the state of China. Anyway, so we follow his jobs, and he has a couple of bright ideas to go live in a semi-rural area to save money and all sorts of stuff. And he runs or helps run a clothing business in a mall in one of these other cities. Get a lot of insight into how the knockoff and counterfeit industry kind of affects business there. As soon as you get a product which people want, there's plenty of copies of it, and it's always driving the price down, so you have to do more. And he has many unsuccessful jobs like this, and in this section we start to see more of his self, and he gets more introspective, and there's a bit more self-analysis. And I was finding a lot of things in common about his thinking with my own personality or traits or whatever. He's very much an introvert most of the time. His connections and associations with other people seem painful for him for a lot of time. He has a lot of social anxiety, and this was ringing a lot of bells for me anyway. And the last section of the book basically shows how he became a writer. Like I said earlier, he had a couple of what became sections of this book published online in China in the early 2020s during the COVID lockdown, and became wildly successful. And he's basically been able to leverage that into a writing career. I think he's in his 40s now, late 40s. And he is a published writer, and he has had a lot of success because of his exploits. And like I said, it's I'd like to say it's eye-opening, but I think that may be even a cliche. It's just it's a reminder that people everywhere have similar experiences, and even if they are extreme, you can relate to them. And Jack Hargraves has done a masterful job in translating this book. I have the Kindle version, as you can see here. The language is very colloquial, but uses Chinese terms for names and places, and it kind of it runs very smoothly. It's not the kind of weird half-translated stuff that you get in some books. The only odd part I found about it was when he talks about his parents. His parents are from another generation before the hyper-capitalist type thing came in, before the money makers became more powerful in Chinese society, and half the time he's excusing his parents for not being in this generation, for not preparing them for it, but other times he seems to be almost castigating them. And I'm not sure if it was translated well, because it seems very harsh compared to his other thoughts. Like I said, there's a lot of self-analysis, a lot of introvert type stuff going on later in the book. He kind of analyses himself, and when he starts writing, he tries to emulate other writers. That's the other interesting thing in this book. He is a big fan of many Western writers like Jane Austen, J.D. Salinger, and he seems to relate to a lot of their stories. That's not something you expect from a Chinese person. I don't know why I didn't expect that, but it's just not something in that popular conception of Chinese people that we don't think of them reading classic Western literature, although there's no reason why they shouldn't be unless those books are suppressed in China, which I have no idea about what the width and breadth of censorship of classic English works are over there. So anyway, it's a very enjoyable book. Like I said, it will kind of ring bells of common human experience for you where you weren't expecting it. And a lot of our images of modern China are probably outdated already, and there's been upsurges and downturns since the events in this book were written. So it's always changing, and it's just a great insightful book about another life, another place. So that is I Deliver Parcels in Beijing by Hugh Anyan. Very fascinating, interesting book. It's very human. Earlier chapters about the actual parcel delivery stuff are kind of probably less insightful than the later sections of the book about himself and his other jobs and his life experiences. But stick with it. It's interesting, and it will draw you in and leave you thinking a lot about common humanity, common traits, common experiences. So that is I Deliver Parcels in Beijing. Okay, so that is pretty much that review done. I am reading about 3 books at once. So just the other day, this book arrived. It is the final Laundry series book by Charles Stross. This is the Regicide Report. I'm only a couple of chapters into it, as you might be able to see by the bookmark there. I've been reading the Laundry series books for at least 15 years, a large chunk of my life, and I will miss them when they're gone. Something about Charles Stross kind of resonated with me. He's only a couple of years or 2 or 3 years older than me, and he kind of on that same level with me, his interests and attitudes and sarcasm and what have you kind of matched me, and I've lapped up pretty much everything he's read, and this series was basically the backbone of my fandom of his work, so sad to see that one end, but I'm sure he's itching to get onto something else. Also, talking of translated Chinese work, I also recently started on this, Chen Qifan's Waste Tide, and it's a sort of cyberpunkish future look at life on a part of China where a whole lot of e-waste is dumped into the area, and the various clans and lifestyles and conflicts about that going on. I'm only a couple of chapters into that one likewise, and also still on the boil after many months is the Routledge Companion to Cyberpunk Culture. It's kind of like scholarly articles on the subject of cyberpunk. I'm working my way slowly through this one. A lot of highfalutin stuff going on in this one, as well as kind of like interlude chapters where they look at a certain book or book series or author's work, which is very interesting. So that's pretty much what's keeping me busy these days on the book front. We'll probably be back next week with another review. I've recently finished the 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. Reading Slow Gods recently got me back into the habit of reading her books, where I had a copy of 15 Lives of Harry August for about 10 years, and I never got around to reading it, but now I have read it, I have finished it, and I'll have some things to say about that in the next video. Alright, we'll catch you later. Cheers.